Now, in a time where everyone and everything is racist, Christmas is no exception. Apparently, some take offence at the idea of a white Christmas. Not to worry, there are now ranges of ethnically diverse Christmas ornaments for people who want their trimmings to reflect them. And although used as an accompaniment to the festivities, they can also help to open up difficult conversations on race and colour. To shed some light on this topic, I'm joined by the social policy analyst and cultural writer, Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Rakib, where are you really from?
Where am I really from? Well, Calvin, I was born in Fulham, family home's in Luton. I'm originally of Bangladeshi and North Indian origin. It's not very difficult, is it? No need to be offended by that question.
Thank you very much, Rakib. I knew you'd be straight up with that. What do you think about multiculturalism? Do you think it needs reining in to build social cohesion for the good of Brits from all ethnic, religious and cultural backgrounds?
Well, Calvin, you ask a great question. I think it's been a difficult year on the multiculturalism front. We saw the Leicester disorders primarily between young Muslim and Hindu men in a city which has traditionally been heralded as a paragon of multiculturalism and interfaith relations. We've also seen the publication of numerous reports on group-based child sexual abuse, where public institutions prioritise racial sensitivities over the bread and butter of protecting the most vulnerable. So I think that what we need to do, we need to do away with state-sponsored multiculturalism in Britain. We need to focus more on shared values, mutual obligations, and a sense of common purpose, because all too often what I see are people prioritising what is different between various groups in the UK as opposed to what we have in common.
Absolutely. And what I often see is people taking offence on behalf of other people. We've seen Brighton University saying, you know, have a happy winter closure period instead of saying happy Christmas, because they're afraid of offending people that aren't Christian. Now, I know you're not a Christian yourself, and I see you there in a Christmas jumper, so I'm taking it on good faith that you're not offended by the word Christmas. Can we just shed some light on this, that people from other faiths, other religions, don't tend to be offended by people that have a faith or religion?
Well, I mean, we have a diversity of faiths in my hometown of Luton. I've never come across anyone. I haven't come across a single non-Christian who's offended by the greeting Merry Christmas. I think much of this is completely imaginary. And I think all too often you have, modern left-wing activists, many of them suffering from a white saviour complex, who think that ethnic and religious minorities in the UK need to be constantly mollycoddled. They're fabricating problems. And I think what they're doing, instead of cultivating social cohesion, they're actually creating tensions between communities through their activist endeavours.
No, I'm with you entirely. That mollycoddling that you speak of is actually a form of condescending racism, isn't it? Because it's
very patronising.
Yeah, it's seeing people differently and treating them differently based on their ethnicity. We saw the Sussexes release a Christmas card that said, what was it, joyous holiday season. Again, every time I speak about this, people say, you're making it up, Calvin. No one's trying to cancel Christmas, but people are literally taking the word Christmas out of Christmas. Do you think there's something deeper behind this, or is it just people like me being culture warriors and stirring things up that don't exist?
Well, I think that what we've seen in recent times, and this came through the latest census data, Calvin, is that there has been a decline in Christian identification in England and Wales. Back in 2001, over 7 in 10 people living in England and Wales identified as Christian. For the first time in a census, that's dropped to under half. I believe 46.2% is the latest figures from the 2021 census. I do feel there are certain groups in society, political groups. There's one thing promoting secularism, but what I'm quite worried about is that there's this growing comfort when it comes to anti-Christian sentiment. I think that some of these groups that I refer to, they're very protective when it comes to minority faiths living in England expressing their religious identity, celebrating their festivities. But that sort of freedom, that sense of celebration, isn't necessarily afforded to traditional Christians, and I think that's a crying shame, and that should change.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, obviously, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you're a Muslim man, and I think you've been used as a scapegoat. I think many people, many of these, you call them, what I forgot what you call them, I call them metropolitan liberal elites, but the secularists will use you as an excuse to rid us of people like me, to say we don't want to be talking about Christ, we don't want to be talking about Christmas because it might offend the Muslim minorities. And I think, honestly, that's a shame and it's a disgrace and it's politicization of both of our faiths. But I want to ask you specifically about the case that's been talked about a lot this week, in that there has been a wonderful lady called Isabel, who has been arrested for praying silently in her head within the bounds of a PSPO area. Now, should it ever be against the law to pray in your own head?
I'm amazed by that story, if truth be told. But in some ways, I'm not. There'll be some people who won't be surprised because, as I said, there's one thing promoting community cohesion through, say, secular organisations, but what we're seeing there, that's just that's a fundamental lack of tolerance. And I feel that will feed into growing perceptions that forms of religious expression, quiet moments of prayer in public, religious minorities are afforded those freedoms, and I think that's actually a good thing. But members of Christian communities are not necessarily afforded those freedoms. So what you have is almost a two-tier system which is developing, and I think that we should be very worried about that.
Absolutely with you. As always, the wonderful Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Mate, happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas, mate.
That's what it's all about.